friend and I were discussing contemporary music, and we were like, the one thing you always want to leave with is a melody, something that you remember, something that touches you, and something that you remember. And when you hear his music, there's always something that you remember. It might be one phrase, but you always, there's something that touches you and you remember it.
He's a brilliant composer and a lovely human being. Yeah, he's a very giving person. He has a broader sense of himself and a broader sense of music and what he plans to do with music. And not unlike Still, he looked at the more angular forms of composition and purposefully dismissed it or walked away from it. Did maybe not dismissed it, but walked away from it and said that does not encompass it doesn't present who I am.
The wonderful Daryl Taylor came to do some concerts in I think in Denton in Texas where I was, and so I went up and I heard them and I heard all this amazing music by Black composers, and I was like, hello, this is meant to be. And now I can have these amazing songs, and I tried to program these songs that I especially fell in love with by H. Leslie Adams on my recitals. There's just something about his melodies that just, there's some composers that can comment on an emotion, and then there's some composers that just like put you inside of it. And he's definitely one of those. They're not necessarily complex rhythms and notes to learn, but just the emotional truth of it is very beautiful. And so I find if you're going to sing it and make it work, then you have to find the honest place in yourself to be able to sing that music, and that I find very beautiful. So that's slightly different. Some composers you have to think very technically and think about, is this 12 tone, is this whatever, whereas that one, it's just an emotional, truthful journey.
Harrison Leslie Adams, better known as H. Leslie Adams, was born in Cleveland, Ohio on December 30th, 1932. He studied voice, piano, and composition at the Oberlin College Conservatory of Music, where he earned his Bachelor's of Music degree in 1955. He went on to earn a master's degree in music from the California State University at Long Beach in 1967, and his PhD from the Ohio State University in 1973. He also completed additional studies in composition with Edward Matilda, Eugene O'Brien, and Marcel Dick from 1978 to 1983.
Yes, I grew up in Cleveland on the east side. In fact, the house that the folks moved into when I was 3, that's where I'm still calling from. That's where I'm living today. The schools that I attended were in walking distance from my home. I started studying music when I was 4 years old. My folks wanted me to take piano lessons, which was kind of unusual because most of the kids were out playing ball on the street and that kind of thing. But I had to practice the piano 50 minutes a day, every day. And I was studying from Dorothy Smith, The Two Houses Down. We had a book that had little small melodies in it, classical. At the end of that book, there were several pages of staves, blank staves. And I started filling in it with the G clef sign, F clef sign, writing in the little notes. And I enjoyed writing little tunes that I made up. And a lot of it was, I guess, copying the style of the composers I was playing. Mozart, Bach, Haydn, very simple, though, simple versions of that. When I went to junior high school, I was featured in some of the program, playing my pieces and accompanying the music classes, and I enjoyed it very much. I think I remember at 12 o'clock the bell would ring. There would be the lunch break, and I remember racing out of the school, dashing into the corner, turning the corner, running home, just in time to catch the Fred Waring show, which was only 15 minutes at the time. They had those, from noon to 12:15, and I would get home just in time for their finale, which was the Fred Waring Glee Club, and I thought I was in heaven. I mean, that was the most beautiful music I could imagine hearing. But the care of the words, the lyrics, the attention to the feeling of the music was so beautiful. Well, I started playing the piano. Music lessons at 5, so by the time I got to junior high school, it was like 7 or 8, I think. And so that was it was a beautiful experience for me. Colleen, of course, had the young people's concerts for the kids, for the school kids. And we would go to Severance Hall, and the orchestra would play for us, and it was very impressive. There was also a little theater downtown, which was the backside of the public hall, and the little theater featured smaller concerts. And I remember hearing Beto Sayao, Arthur Rubinstein played there. I remember Hazel Scott played a program which was mostly classical, which surprised me because she was so noted for jazz. She was really good. That surprised me. It surprised everybody. I think probably she longed to play classical, but she was sold as a jazz pianist. But this particular program, it was classical, And then at the very end, she played some so-called boogie woogie with the walking bass in the left hand, and of course it was but the program itself was classical. Hazel Scott, and fine technique. Looking back at it, they were so ahead of the norm. My dad was a self-taught, educated man. He had a encyclopedia, full set of encyclopedias. It's still down in the living room. It's kind of dusty now, but most of that information is, of course, on a computer. But he read every bit. He read Shakespeare, history, philosophy. He was the star of my family. I was just a walk-on. I was just an observer. He was a star. Now, unfortunately, he was a smoker, and that did affect his health later on. My mother loved music too, and she would attend concerts with me, and they enjoyed me playing and hearing me perform. And at that time, performing was very standard. In the church, they had me to play in church programs, and incidentally, my mother was Baptist. My father was Methodist. My mother was Democrat. My father was Republican. And they got along, as far as I could tell, perfectly. I never heard any arguments they never had any arguments or any kind of anything that sounded like they were disagreeing. If it was a front, they sure put it on to perfection. Music education was my major to appease my parents. I was not going to argue with them. I was just delighted to be able, to be able to study music. Now, within music ed, it was voice, piano, and composition. Composition came the last 2 years, but the voice was the full 4 years, and it was 2 50-minute lessons a week for 4 years under Robert Fountain. But the New York experience was an adventure. I was sowing my wild oats musically and getting into a whole lot of stuff that's not in my resume. Clerk typist for various organizations, businesses, just as a job. I also, and this is just a footnote, I was a singing pianist in a nightclub in New Jersey, and that was just to see if I could do it. And as I did, I was held over for a month and a half, and as I sang, my voice got better and better and better, and more beautiful and more rich. But I never did that again, and I didn't particularly want to. I mean, because there was nothing I could do with it. I wasn't going to be a singer, a club singer, but I wanted to see if I could do it. I also studied acting. It was a fine experience, and I ended up in a show, in a production, a professional production, which was good for me because I didn't like the play, and I didn't like the experience, and I didn't like I projected the kind of roles that I would play, and I didn't. I said I'm not going to do that. I'm just not going to do it. I remember talking to the director of they were getting ready for Raisin in the Sun, and I talked to him, and the first question he asked me was, "Why do you want to be an actor?" And I couldn't tell him. And so I said, "Well, that's just about that sort of answers that question." But I did appreciate the theater. I just absolutely loved the theater, and some of my most rich experiences were going to Broadway shows. In particular, Joseph Schildkraut's performance in The Diary of Anne Frank was breathtaking. It was so good that when that curtain fell and its last line, if there hadn't been a curtain call, the audience would have left in silence. It was that effective.
Adams has written many lovely songs for voice and piano in the 40 years he has been composing professionally. Equally at ease for writing for orchestra, chamber ensemble, organ, piano, and chorus, his treatment of art song is particularly praiseworthy. Important cycles include Nightsongs, with 6 texts by African American poets, and The Wider View.
Singing Nightsongs, singing H. Leslie Adams' Nightsongs, 2 of the pieces that actually resonate really deeply with me, Drums of Tragedy and Prayer. And it's interesting because you see two different styles that are tied together by the same piece of string, right? So when we talk about the poetry aspect, if you're talking about prayer, I ask you this, which way to go. I ask you this, which sin to bear, which crown to put upon my hair. I do not know, Lord God, I do not know. Then you get a song like, or you get a poem like Drums of Tragedy. Beat the drums of tragedy for me. Beat the drums of tragedy and death, and let the choir sing a stormy song to drown out the rattle of my dying breath. That is very intense imagery, right? Compared to, I ask you this, which way to go. I ask you this, which sin to bear. You see the dynamic contrast happening between the textural structure of what Langston Hughes had to offer. And for H. Leslie Adams, the way that he composed these pieces, you he has such a direct tie to what the text is saying. So for instance, prayer, I ask you this, which way to go. So it starts off boom 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 boom. You're in this, you're already in this state. I ask you this, which way to go. I ask you this, which sin to bear, which crown to put upon my head. I do not know, Lord God. I do not know. I ask you this, which way to go. I ask you this, which sin to bear, which crown to put upon my head. I do not know, Lord God. I do not
with some of that text, because it makes sense. I feel like when I sing those lines, or since you went away, or I asked you this, it was ready to go. I feel like there's something that is moving like in the same path, like you would get with like La Shakopyanga or Cara Sposa, Dove Sei, also what you would get with the Pergolesi Stabat Mater. You get those same kind of. But then there's that blue note. There's that blue note thing that happens that only somebody who is within that tradition can get. So it's a really, to me, it feels there is a sort of natural and leaning in, and then you can kind of spread the language and say like instead of like to me, those kind of things. Or I ask you this, Lord God, I do, like you get to just stretch on some things, and it's really good.
White performers oftentimes can be very shy about something that looks like it's for African American singers, and the name of the cycle was 6 Songs on Poetry by African American Poets, or something like that. It is a little clinical, but that wasn't the problem as much as I said. The concern I raised to Leslie was that there are some people that will not perform this work simply because of the title, and it's a shame. They shouldn't avoid it. There's no reason that they have to, but knowing people as I do, if you could find a more, not that there's anything that one needs to be ashamed of African American composers. Those poets remain African American, whether or not their race is indicated in the title of the work. And there wasn't a real compelling reason. I mean, if it was African American expressions or something like that, that would be maybe different, but that wasn't really the thrust of the work at all. And so, coming to the realization that there was a certain continuity among the poems of kind of nocturnal, and so rather than calling them nocturnes, he called them night songs.
So something that is really great about H. Leslie Adams also is that typically we have a high, medium, and low key. And you don't always get that with composers. It also helps make it helps make the music more accessible. So like for me, I'm a tenor, but I sit lower in the spectrum of tenorial relations. And it's so nice to be able to have a choice, to even choose the higher key or choose the lower key for certain songs. And I think the way that things are written, depending on what key you sing them in, it has a totally different feeling behind it. Do you pick the higher key and feel more of a sense of energy, or do you pick the medium key and feel a sense of focus, or do you pick the low key and feel a sense of grounding? Obviously it depends on what the composition is, because I don't know many people who can sing in the high, low, and medium keys. But it's nice to be able to have an option. It's nice to be able to say, here's this set of art songs. Let me give this gift to you. And it could be a bass, a baritone, a mezzo, a soprano, a tenor, a countertenor, a contralto. There's space for all of these different voice types to thrive by singing his music, because there is accessibility for all of these different voice types.
I'm aware that even though it's not going to go too much beyond a tenth range, and then after it's finished, I think, well, can this be raised? How would it sound? And quite often, and the way they're conceived, it can be raised or lowered, and so I just go ahead and make medium, high, medium, low, so that more people could sing it.
I had the opportunity, I don't know how many years ago, a friend of mine did excerpts from his opera Blake for the National Opera Association. And that it was very interesting, because his opera is nothing like his art songs. It's much thicker, because his accompaniment isn't really thick. He really, he lets the voice really shine. As a pianist, he lets the voice really shine. Everybody is shining in Blake. The orchestra, you know what I'm saying? It's just, and it can be really thick in some parts, orchestration wise, singing wise. But in this one aria, It's very rhythmic. It's wonderful. I love it because he's written the fire in the accompaniment, but when the voice comes in, he pulls back off of it. The character that I played was a white slave master. And he was open to that. He was like, oh yes, oh yes, oh yes. So the one piece that I did, it's called That While Fire. It is similar to some of his art songs. The rest of the opera is not. So that was my first art. I never worked on any art songs with him. I worked on the opera with him. Oh, I mean, his songs are just so beautiful. I can't even, because Since You Went Away is one of my favorites to listen to, but it's not easy to sing. You know, if you've lost someone, you know that there's like right in that key change, like it hits you right in your throat, right at that key change, you know? And so I've always been like, you know what? I'm not going to touch this one. I'm not that artist who can cry and sing.
So that was one of the first pieces that I ever sang of his. And it always has such a special place in my heart. The melody is so simple, but it reaches so deep. And, you know, we've all, maybe not all of us, but a lot of us have been in this very dark place when you've just broken up with somebody and, you know, you're still a little bit in shock and everything just seems different around you. And, you know, that's what the singer is going, the character is going through in that moment. Since you went away, it's like the sky used to be blue, but now it's not blue anymore. And the clouds used to be there, but, you know, they're not quite the same. And that's one of the great honors of being an artist, is that no experience is wasted.
His stirringly expressive song, For You There Is No Song, appears in the Anthology of Art Songs by Black American Composers, compiled by Willis C. Patterson. Subsequent to this publication, the song has become popular with young singers. It is listed individually in Villamil's Singer's Guide to the American Art Song. This song is part of a cycle of 5 poems by Edna St. Vincent Millay, entitled Millay Songs.